Hello, it's me, Ariza Gaming, and today I want to talk about the Printerceptor story trait that was recently added to Oxygen Not Included in the November Quality of Life update. This is a story trait that I think is actually more impactful than any of the other story traits we've received so far with the free game updates. It applies to the base game as well as all the DLC mechanics. And essentially, to summarize very quickly, this is going to let you print some specific requested items. It's going to let you print any critter egg or any plant seed in the game. And there's a number of situations where this can be run determinative. It can be the optimal move on your asteroid to go and find this thing and activate it immediately before you do anything else. And for the random story traits that you can select on the game start menu when you're generating your asteroid, this is the only one that I think impacts your gameplay flow directly. Stuff like George the Hermit and the Biobot Builder and the Somnium Synthesizer, those all enhance your run, but they don't fundamentally change how you're playing on an asteroid. But the Printerceptor really does. So I want to very quickly go over the mechanics of how you get this set up. It's pretty easy. But more importantly, I want to go through specific circumstances where you would want to use the Printerceptor, specific planet combination types, both with the classic game mode, the spaced out game mode, and with the Frosty Planet Pack DLC and the Prehistoric Planet Pack DLC. Because there's some really interesting edge cases where you can use this to completely change the gameplay of what you're doing. So, yeah, first of all, you can select this story trait in the game menu, but what you'll do when you find it, click on it, it's a building, but it has a passcode. So you've got to get a duplicate to come find it on your classic and spaced out minor asteroids. So in this case, we're on a Relica minor asteroid. Ignore all the oxalate. You are guaranteed to find the Printerceptor on your starting asteroid on the larger starting asteroids. But if you're on a Moonlets asteroid, you're not guaranteed to find this on your starting asteroid, and you're not guaranteed to find this on your teleporter asteroid either. So you may require rocket travel to get access to your Printerceptor. And if you've got rocket travel, then you could probably access all of the other resources on the other planets at some point. So it's less relevant there in some circumstances. But if you do find it, it's very, very impactful because the resources you have before rocket travel are limited. So, yeah, you'll get your duplicate to come in here and activate the machine. They don't require any specific skills to do this. The room is full of a little bit of oxygen, so you just go ahead and open this. But it can generate anywhere on the asteroid. You are going to need to do a little bit of exploring to find this thing. Its position is completely random. But once you actually activate it, you'll see it's got these red exclamation marks on it. It requires an access code. And you can't put the wrong access code in here. You've just got to interact with another point of interest on the asteroid. You've got to find the code that's hidden somewhere else randomly in the asteroid. And if you played this, then you'll know where to look. It's a suspicious-looking toilet down here that's flapping its lid up and down. When you activate the Printerceptor, the lid will start flapping up and down. You can see it has an unclog option. So again, you're just going to want to get a duplicate in here. It's a very quick error, not much needs to be done. But the difficulty is, both of these items can appear anywhere on the asteroid. They will always appear on the same asteroid, but depending on where it spawns, you may need oxygen masks to get your dupes in there safely. You may need bionic duplicates to get in there safely, depending on the circumstance. Well, you won't need them, but they can be helpful if you have the bionic booster pack DLC. But what I would say is, if you have Atmo suits and you can get here, great. But often, the reason to actually do the Printerceptor quest and to get this prioritized early is because you don't actually have access to Reed Fiber or Drecos or something along those lines. There are quite a few starts in the game where you don't have access to Reed Fiber without space travel. And this will let you get Reed Fiber so you can make Atmo suits before doing your space travel. That can be very important. So think about that. Make sure you've got your dupes in a position where they can explore the asteroid without getting eye irritation, yucky lungs with slime lung, toasty surroundings, chilly surroundings. Make sure you've got your heaters and coolers in place. Make sure you've got your oxygen masks. But yeah, Ada is now unclogging the toilet. And then there you go. If we click this, it's all sorted out. Looks disgusting. And then the machine will actually open up. and then you can start doing the stuff with it. Fantastic. So now that you've actually got the machine activated, there's two things that you need to do. There are stored charges and there are stored databanks. So what will happen is, when your printing pod activates, it will either let you print a duplicate or an item. I'm sure you're very familiar with this if you played this game at all. Or if there's nothing in here that you desperately need, you can intercept the charge and you can send it to this machine instead. And once you have 3 charges, you can get a print. But you also need to store some databanks in here. And the databank cost is 25 for the first print. And then every subsequent print is more expensive by 25 extra databanks. So the first one is 25, the second one's 50, the third one's 75, so on and so forth. But the issue is, there's only so many databanks that you have access to on the starting asteroid without space travel. And part of the point of using this machine is it's going to let us get certain critters and plants without using space travel. So what I would say for this is you will often have geysers on your asteroid that you can analyze if you have a dupe with the field research skill, which is pretty easy to get. And when you analyze the geysers, it will give you a small random amount of databanks, usually somewhere in the order of magnitude of 10 databanks. And depending on where you are, you might have a lot of geysers to look at. So we're on a Relica minor asteroid at the moment, and there's at least 6 geysers here. Perhaps you don't want to analyze the active volcano, but you're often in a circumstance where you'll have enough databanks available, especially from inspecting things like computer desks as well. They'll give you databanks immediately. You should be able to scrape together 75 databanks on any random minor asteroid, provided it's not geodormant or something like that. And on a classic asteroid, you're also going to have many more geysers, even if it is geodormant. And again, you've got to explore the whole asteroid to find things, so you're probably finding geysers along the way. So you should definitely have enough databanks to do 2 or possibly even 3 prints with this machine before you have to go into space and start doing stuff. So that's pretty good. What circumstances are we actually going to want to print in? Well, let's go back to a little PowerPoint that we did a while ago, one of our first videos, and I'll show you some that don't involve the Frosty Planet Pack and Prehistoric Planet Pack DLCs, and then we'll get to that stuff later. When you're selecting a new asteroid to do a run on, if you want the Frosty critters or the prehistoric critters on your asteroid, you can click the Scramble DLCs button. And this will actually let you mix in the content from the different DLCs. So you can guarantee that the Frosty biomes appear with the Frosty critters and plants, and you can do the exact same for the Prehistoric Planet Pack. So there isn't a strict need to use the Printerceptor to get access to these critters, plants, and resources. However, if you don't actually want all the space taken up by these DLC biomes, and you just want 1 or 2 specific DLC items, you can turn these off and then use the Printerceptor to grab those. Like maybe you just want access to a lum, so you can get a blum lum and start making algae instead of using electrolyzers for everything. So you might disable all these biomes and then just print a lum and then feed it with a plant that you can find, because lums eat bristle blossoms too. You don't have to have the overgrow vine for this. You could do something similar with the lure plant from the wetlands biome. If you just want access to free plastic, but you don't want all of the nastiness of the wetland biome, you can print that with the Printerceptor instead of generating it with this. So this does give you a lot of options. And again, if you want to make sure that you're setting your asteroids so that you specifically get the Printerceptor story trait, just go into the story traits menu and tick the ones you want, untick the ones you don't want. The Printerceptor, I think, is usually on by default. I haven't seen it off by default yet. But this is what it looks like in the menu. I probably should have talked about this at the start of the video, but oh well. But yeah, there you go. So let's have a look at the classic asteroids first. So these are the biggest asteroids you're going to find. The 2 POIs for the Printerceptor can appear anywhere on this main asteroid that you start on. But there isn't really much need for a Terra asteroid, because between the Terra asteroid and the radioactive swamp asteroid that you can teleport to, you have access to all of the base game biomes. There's no unique critters or plants in the barren biome, so you don't really need to worry about not having access to that. You're not going to get stuff any quicker with the Printerceptor than you would just looking for it yourself. And you don't want to spend all those databanks if you don't have to. But there are a few cases of classic asteroids that are missing biomes. So the first one that I'll talk about, and we did a video covering all of these asteroids a while ago, so feel free to check out that video if you want to see the rest of the content of this PowerPoint. But the Arborea asteroid and the associated radioactive Terra asteroid are quite weird in that there's no marsh biome. So you're not going to have access to thimble reeds or dusk caps unless you manage to get them later on. You'll have to go into the outer systems to actually find these items, and you may not necessarily want to do that. So it probably is quicker to get them with the Printerceptor. And the thimble reeds are pretty important because if you have, say, a polluted water vent, this lets you get access to reed fiber really easily without having to bother with Drecos. Drecos are fine, but it is an option. And if you want dust caps for making, say, mushroom-based food recipes, then you're going to lack those on an Arborea asteroid. So you're probably actually going to want to print a dust cap, especially if you have access to lots of slime that you want to turn into food or otherwise dispose of. So this is a case where I think it's worth doing. If we go to the Badlands asteroid as well, the Badlands asteroid and the associated radioactive swamp asteroid are actually completely missing the ocean biome. Now, you may be able to set the subsurface ocean trait on your radioactive swamp asteroid, so that might save your butt on that one. But otherwise, you're probably not actually going to have access to poke shells or water weeds. Again, unless you manage to find them somewhere else. So, if you want poke shells eating a load of polluted dirt from, say, an ethanol distiller industry, you're kind of out of luck unless you use the Printerceptor. So I think poke shells is a good concept for this. Water weeds as well. If you want lettuce for making frost burgers, you're really going to struggle to do that on Badlands unless you use the Printerceptor. So that's something that's worth noting. And then if we go to Iridio, that one also has the radioactive Terra asteroid. And as a result, you're completely lacking the swampy biome with the plug slugs in it on this map. So if you want to do plug slug ranching for extra power generation, let's say you have like some metal volcanoes around and you just want to use that as your power source, you're not really going to have much option apart from going into deep space or using the Printerceptor. So plug slugs are worth doing. Bog buckets can also be potentially useful, but I don't think that that's a high priority Printerceptor target. They're not that unique in terms of what they do, what their diet is, etc. But yeah, if you want plug slugs on Iridio, you're going to have to do it this way. So those are print cases that I think are pretty justified for the base game classic asteroids. If we have a look at the base game spaced out asteroids, there's a few different specific cases. So the Turania asteroid, you have teleporter access to the oily swamp asteroid, and you also have a nearby irradiated forest. Between all three of these asteroids, you do have access to all of the standard biomes. But if you don't want to do rocket travel to the irradiated forest, you're going to lack access to the ocean biome and the radioactive biome. So if you want poke shells and water weeds, or perhaps if you want beeters and Saturn critter traps, but you don't really want to go space traveling yet, then you can use the Printerceptor for this. Possibly worth it. Again, probably relatively low priority because this asteroid is nearby. It's just a carbon dioxide rocket away. But one thing is also, because the minor asteroids are a bit smaller than the classic asteroids, you're actually going to be able to find the Printerceptor and the toilet a bit easier in this case. So the opportunity cost is a bit lower, and the net reward is a bit lower, but it's something to consider. On the Folia asteroid, you actually have, again, you have all of the three biomes between all the three asteroids, but if you don't want to get the rocket over to the irradiated swampy asteroid, you're going to lack immediate access to plug slugs, and you're also going to lack access to beaters and Saturn critter traps, and you're also going to lack access to thimble reeds and dusk caps. And again, you do have the Drecos on your home asteroid, so you don't need to necessarily worry about reed fiber for Atmos suits. But if you want to do stuff involving beaters, and you don't want to do rocket travel, then using the Printerceptor for a B-Tiny can be a good option. The only thing I would say, if you're printing a B-Tinys start dying immediately in temperatures higher than 0 degrees. So you are going to need to set up some active cooling in the room with the Printerceptor to safely print a B tiny to the point where you can move it wherever you want. So it's a little bit tricky, but it is definitely a use case that is justified in circumstances where you don't have access to a radioactive biome, and those do come up occasionally for various reasons. And next, if we have a look at the Quagmyrus asteroid, again, this asteroid does have access to all 3 standard biomes between all 3 close asteroids, but if you don't want to rocket travel to the irradiated marsh, then you're actually going to lack immediate access to a forest biome or a marsh biome, or the radioactive biome. So if you need to do, say, some pip planting, then you're going to have to do some rocket travel to actually find the pips. And we all know how powerful pip planting is. Similarly, you're not going to have access to the arbitrary for making wood from polluted water in this case. And obviously, if you wanted, you could enable the Frosty DLC, scatter it in, find a bonbon tree and feed it snow. But bonbon trees aren't particularly good at making wood, if I'm being honest. And making the snow is pretty annoying when you're on a non-frosty asteroid and you're not just surrounded by hundreds of tons of snow. So possibly printing a pip and an arbitrary makes sense. You could print an oxyfern as well, but I generally don't think it's that worth it when you can print a lum and get blumlums instead. But if you don't have the prehistoric planet pack, then printing oxyferns is probably also something to consider, especially if you're aiming to use seed duplication to duplicate your oxyferns. We did a video about that a while ago as well. That can be worth doing in this case. And again, if you want access to thimble reeds or dust caps or beaters or Saturn critter traps without rocket travel, then the Printerceptor can help you there. Saturn critter traps are really helpful for producing large amounts of hydrogen. If you need large amounts of hydrogen and you don't have a large amount of water that you can electrolyze. So that is something to consider. So those are the 3 minor asteroids in the base game spaced out content. With the moonlets, because the moonlets are all in sort of a cluster together, you're not expecting to have access to all the resources without space travel. You're going to have to do space travel at some point. You're lacking a lot of things, and you definitely won't have enough databanks from geysers and points of interest to even probably do 2 prints, unless you're really thorough. And there's also the chance that you're just missing the Printerceptor on one of these 2 initial asteroids altogether. It might be on any of the moonlets within the cluster. So you definitely can't rely on using the Printerceptor to get you out of trouble. But if you're having difficulty with, say, the flipped or the radioactive ocean starts, where they're really difficult starts because you're lacking key resources, you can roll seeds or use a seed checker online to find a specific seed that does have the Printerceptor, and then you can solve that problem that you're lacking on this seed and escape. So one big issue with the radioactive ocean star is between the radioactive ocean and the connected flipped asteroid with the teleporter, you don't actually have access to either the swampy either the marshy biome for thimblereeds or the jungle biome for Drekos. So unless you have the Frosty Planet Pack DLC and you're adding Mammoths, or you have the Prehistoric Planet Pack DLC and you're adding Rexes, you're not going to have access to a reed fiber source at all. So that means you're going to have to make your first space trip without atmosuits, which could be annoying. So if you find a Printerceptor on one of these 2 asteroids, getting access to a thimblereed that you could just print and then just get your reed fiber growing off of that from polluted water from your industry or a geyser, because there's lots of water geysers on these radioactive ocean asteroids. Doing something like that is probably the optimal way to play the start if you have access to it. So yeah, if you're struggling with radioactive ocean, that is definitely something to consider. But generally, you do have access to a reed fiber source on the other starts, but obviously escaping the flipped asteroid can be a bit complicated as well. So that can make space travel a bit more difficult. So there may be a print that you want to do here to save time. Like in this case, flipped and Deserlands are connected, but you're going to have to do space travel to find pips for pip planting. If you want to do pip planting right away, you might just want to plant a pip, or print a pip egg in the Printerceptor, and then get that going and then sort everything else out after the fact, if you want to do that. There's lots of cases where the Printerceptor is useful, but because it's not guaranteed, I'm not going to overly focus on it, but you can definitely use it to cheese these Moonlet starts. I'll put it that way. So, yeah, that's all the base game content to talk about with respect to the Printerceptor. But if we actually go back to the game, let's have a look at the Frosty Planet Pack DLC and the Prehistoric Planet Pack DLC now. Because those two starting asteroids lack some specific resources. They lack a lot of the base game biomes, and we'll start in chronological order. We're going to go with the Frosty Planet Pack to start with. So we're going to generate a large Ceres asteroid, and we're going to set the Printerceptor as a story trait. We can keep all of these in here as well. We're going to ensure the prehistoric stuff is mixed in. Well, actually, you know we can mix it in. You know you're not going to have to be printing prehistoric stuff in the Frosty DLC. But let's actually just go into the game and have a look. So I'll meet you once we're in there. So, we're on a classic Ceres asteroid, and these asteroids are quite large. They have a fairly good diversity of biomes for a Frosty DLC planet. The Printerceptor in this case is over here on the left, and then the toilet is over here on the right, so they're not too far apart, but it's a classic asteroid, so they're still quite far apart. But essentially, between the Ceres asteroid, and then if we go out to space, and we have a look at the... If we have a look at the Stinko Swamp asteroid, there is one notable exception of a biome that's missing, and that is the sandstone biome. And unlike the base game, there's no starter hatch available just to the left of your printing pod. So you won't have access to hatches at all. This means that you're not going to have access to coal produced from critters. And similarly, you're not going to have access to the mealwood plant or the bristle blossom plant, because those are exclusive to the sandstone biome as well. And these plants are notable because that's Dreco food. If you want glossy Drecos, which, as I've alluded to in a previous video, combo very well with Phloxes, then you're going to have to print the mealwood to feed the Dreco that you find on the Stinko Swamp asteroid, so that you can actually get your glossy Dreco, because that's how you get the glossy Dreco eggs. I mean, there's a 2% chance otherwise, and you can use the Critter Fluxomatic, but that's certainly a case where it might be worth doing. And if you want large amounts of coal production, specifically, then you may need to actually print a hatch on Ceres. So, we're back on the classic Relica asteroid with the Prehistoric Planet Pack, and you can see in this case the Printerceptor is over here to the right, and then the toilet is quite a bit down here. It's over here, see? So again, they're both on the same asteroid, but we are lacking some key biomes. So we've actually got the same Stinko Swamp asteroid as last time, as the Teleporter asteroid. So not only are we lacking the sandstone biome with the hatches, but we're also lacking access to the forest biome with pips and arbor trees. So if we want to pip plant, say, some prehistoric plants, like potentially some seacomb leaves or possibly an overgrow vine, we don't have the option to do that unless we use the Printerceptor. And again, if you want a hatch for coal, obviously we have the lum available for peat, and peat can be used for a lot of the things that coal is used for. But if you do want coal specifically, you're going to have to print a hatch to get access to some. And again, if you actually want to feed the lums with bristle blossoms instead of the overgrow vine, let's say you just want to not worry about all of the doors and managing the vines, then you could use the Printerceptor to bypass the overgrow vine and just grow bristle blossoms with your water. Although you'll probably have to cool things down a bit to get that to actually work on Relica. But the point is the Printerceptor actually makes that an option. So, yeah, missing quite a few biomes. And this is completely lacking access to those things, unless you go into deep space. One thing I will say is, after cycle 500, the game will usually let you print stuff even from biomes that you don't have access to, but it's very random, and by that point in the game, you're going to have a lot of stuff unlocked. So, it's not particularly fun to rely on a completely random roll of the regular printing pod to get access to these things. We know this because on our Twitch run, where we actually generated a map without an oil biome, it took us until about cycle 700 or so to actually print a slickster so that we could start doing our carbon dioxide recycling. So, relying on random printing pod stuff for that sort of thing is not really viable, which is why I haven't brought it up in the video. Generally. So, the Printerceptor is very good at bypassing that specific case in specific circumstances. But yeah, let's have a look at the spaced out minor asteroids with the Frosty and Prehistoric DLCs, because there's some differences there too. So, we're on Ceres Minor now, we're on the minor asteroid, and if we have a zoom out, you can see the Printerceptor is down here, and then in this case, the toilet is actually all the way up here. But again, they're still in the same asteroid. So, Ceres Minor is a bit interesting. There's actually... So, with the surrounding planets, you have teleporter access to the rusty oil planet, which is right here. Yeah, we need to actually spawn a dupe to get this to load properly. There you go, there's the teleporter. So, you have access to the rusty oil planet, and you also have an irradiated swampy asteroid nearby. But all three of these asteroids between each other actually lack the jungle biome altogether. So this means you're not going to have access to Drecos at all if you're doing the Ceres Minor start. So if you want that easy source of reed fiber, or potentially if you want to do glossy Drecos for plastic, you don't actually really have much choice other than to use the Printerceptor for this, or to wait until an unreasonably large amount of cycles. One other thing to note about the Ceres Minor asteroid only is the ocean biomes are frozen. I don't know why they're not frozen on the classic asteroid, but they are on the spaced out asteroid. But yeah, you're not going to find any poke shells in these biomes full of brine ice. You will still find waterweed seeds and pincher pepper seeds digging through here, which is a good thing, because otherwise you would be completely lacking pincher peppers across all three planets as well. Again, we'll just go have a look at the other asteroids for a second, just to confirm that. So if we reactivate... Yeah, here you go. Wow. This is a very homogeneous asteroid, isn't it? Look, you got the big radioactive biome, you got the little glacier down here in the corner, the metallic biomes next to it. Look at that waterfall. What an aesthetic asteroid. I'm glad we looked at this one. And then again, if we go to the rusty oil, yeah, you can see there's no Drecos anywhere. I mean, this one has a lush core, but we weren't lacking on a forest biome. So yeah, poke shells and Drecos are the print targets for Ceres Minor, I think. Everything else you can more or less get. But again, if you don't want to do rocket travel, you can print a plug slug or a bog bucket or a thimble reed or a dust cap. But I would just recommend printing Drecos. Can you imagine doing a run without Drecos? I can't. So finally, we're on the Relica minor asteroid. And if we zoom out, you can see the Printerceptor is down here, and then the toilet is actually over here in this case. But this actual minor asteroid lacks a lot of biomes, and you actually don't have access to these biomes across the three connected asteroids. So if we go and have a look, we've got Slickers on here, which is the oily sandy swamp asteroid. So let's just go ahead and reveal that. So you can see here, oh, in this case we've got a lush core. You don't normally have a lush core. But yeah, there's the oil biome, you've got the tundra, you've got the swamp biome, you've got the wastelands. And then if we go over to Twigglin, and we reveal this one, perhaps I should have just opened debug mode for this. You can see we've got the forest biome up here, the metallic biome, the ocean biomes, and then the radioactive biome down here. But there really isn't a lot of biome diversity on Relica Minor, to the point where you don't have access to sandy, marshy, or jungle biomes across any of these asteroids. So this means you're going to have to wait until cycle 500 plus, or go into deep space for hatches, mealwoods, bristle blossoms, thimble reeds, dust caps, and Drecos. You don't have access to very many of your base game tools at all. So if you want Drecos or thimble reeds, definitely worth printing if you don't want to have to bother with Rexes for reed fiber. You could mix in the frosty biomes to get mammoths for reed fiber, if you want, but yeah. You're probably going to want to print Drecos, and possibly one of the Dreco food plants, too. Though you do have access to pincher peppers on the Relica Minor. But, yeah. That's one thing that actually makes the Relica start slightly more difficult than you'd expect. The Prehistoric Planet Pack, as I've said before, does feel a lot like Terra Plus, but how you actually get stuff done is a little bit more complicated, and you really don't have access to the normal tools that you use to survive on your on your runs. Perhaps even more so to a degree than on the Frosty Planet Pack starts. At least you have access to some of those tools. But here, you just really don't. So, it's worth thinking about. And then finally, we have the Ceres Moonlet asteroid, which is a bit of a weird case. In this case, you actually have 3 different Ceres themed moonlets, and then you have access to the irradiated swampy asteroid as well as another place to go to. So this is a little bit weird. It's not like your typical moonlet start where you have all of those different ones together. So let's enable sandbox mode. Let's enable the Printerceptor. Let's go have a look at this together, just to see the weirdness. So we're here on the Ceres Moonlets cluster. So if we have a look at the biomes that are available, you've got the starting Phlox biome, you've got the Mammoth biome, you've got the Cold Rust biome, you've got the Cold Ocean biome. And that's about it, really. And then if we go over to the Nectar asteroid, we have the Nectar biome, we have the Tundra biome, we have the Sandstone biome, we have the Wasteland biome, and we have the Oily biomes. And then if we go over to the Magma-ish asteroid with the heat pump, then we have the Barren biome, we have the Forest biome, and we have the Jungle biome. So you can see all these different biomes mixed in here. And then we go over here, and you can see this one is actually the irradiated swamp asteroid. So we've got the radioactive biome, we've got some ice, we've got the metallic biome, and we've got the swampy biome. So overall, you have a good amount of biome coverage between these 4 moonlets. But because you have the cold variants for the sandstone biome and the ocean biome, you're not immediately going to have access to hatches and poke shells. What I would say though is because you have these biomes actually on your asteroid, you will find them fairly often through the regular printing pod, even though you can't find them on the map. So you don't need to worry about those as printing targets. Therefore, you don't really need to worry about using the Printerceptor on the Ceres Moonlets start. You're probably going to have to do a fair bit of rocket travel anyways. But yeah, one thing I would say is if we go and have a look at the star map, and we have a look at Impersino, the one with the heat pump on it. So this asteroid, again, we have the Draco biome over here. So if you don't want to do rocket travel, you're not going to have access to Dracos or Pips or the Arbitraries if you don't have a lush core in your save. So if you want any of those 3 things without having to do rocket travel, then you may want to use the Printerceptor for that, but that's about it. And yeah, there's no Relica Moonlet situation going on. So that's it. That's all the different asteroid types. Those are all the different recommendations I would make for using the Printerceptor. So yeah, those are all of my recommendations for what to print in which circumstances using the Printerceptor. But there's something very important we haven't done yet. We haven't actually had a look at the menu. So we've skipped forward 9 cycles, and we have a pod with 3 charges. We put some databanks in it. Let's actually go ahead and have a look at the menu. It's very exciting. We get our favorite music. So yeah, here's all the different eggs. We've got Dartles, Dracos, Shinebugs, Shove Voles, if you want to print a Shove Vole for some reason, Christ. Slicksters, Puffs, Spigot Seals, Pips. This always selects Pips by default, by the way. Very based Printerceptor, to be honest. I'd always print Pips too if I didn't have them. Plug Slugs, Floxes, Bammets, Nits as well. Pacus, Hatches, Jorbos, Rexes, Sweetles, Poke Shells, Lums, and that's about it. And then also in terms of seeds, you've got the Wart Seed, you've got the Saturn Critter Trap Seed, you've got all the decorative plants as well. I didn't really talk about that because I don't think it's that relevant, but you can print all the decorative plants from here if you really want. We got all the DLC plants as well. We've got Spore Kids, if you want more Spore Kids, or you just don't have one for some reason. And again, you can use the seed duplication techniques that we've covered on this channel for Spore Kids too, so that could be worth doing. Potentially, if you have the Biobot Builder, that could be a good one. You can actually also print Gas Grass, although I don't know why you'd want to do this when you don't have access to Moose, but you can totally do it. Joya Seeds, probably a bit of a waste of databanks, but if you really want a decor plant and you don't have control of your temperature, that's potentially something you can do. The Buddy Buds for floral scent germs. You normally find these in the marshy biomes, so any case where we talked about thimble reeds not being available, you could do the same for Buddy Buds if you really care about that. And yeah, it's just all the plants. And then, of course, we've got the little Bee Tiny at the bottom. But again, if you're printing a bee tiny because you don't have a radioactive biome, make sure that you actively cool your Printerceptor room so he doesn't immediately scald to death. That's bad. But yeah, that's it. Those are overall my thoughts on the Printerceptor in Oxygen Not Included. I think it's a very impactful story trait. You could, if you're really struggling with some of the harder settings for the classic and the minor asteroids, the Printerceptor is guaranteed to be there, and it can save your butt on occasion if you really need it to. You can't rely on it being there for a Moonlets start, but if you do find a Printerceptor on your starting asteroid or your teleporter asteroid in Moonlets, it will let you get up to a lot of crazy shenanigans that you can't normally get up to on Moonlets without rocket travel. So it's a bit of a roll of the dice, but if you find a specific seed where it works, great. You're probably going to make the game a lot easier using your spare databanks for this. But because of the lack of geysers and points of interest on Moonlets, you may only have access to one print, so make it count. Probably a Dreco or a Pip, or a Thimbleweed. Those are my opinions. And again, if you need the DLC content, the Frosty Critters or the Prehistoric Critters, you can just mix those biomes into your classic start. I really do find that the Printerceptor is more important for getting base game content when you're in DLC-themed starts. That's my overall summary of it. But how do you guys use the Printerceptor in your runs? Have you done anything crazy in your game saves involving Printerceptor shenanigans? Has the Printerceptor actually saved your butt already? It could definitely happen. Have you ever hunted a critter species to extinction and had to repopulate it with the Printerceptor? A bit shameful, but it will work if you do accidentally murder your last Slickster or something along those lines. But thanks very much for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it away, Whiskers. Bye for now.
Whiskers sends thanks to the following Twitch subscribers and YouTube members: 999999999, Ayla Ivo, Burglar720, FRD. Lagbot 30000, Neo Deus Machina, Quantum Zari, Stinger's Playground, Sweet Danger Kitty, Terra Cloud, Christian Nielsen 9363, Mark Miller 5161, and Xantiphon.